Hello and welcome to Newsmax Now on this Memorial Day.
And we want to thank you for spending some time with us on this day of reflection and remembrance for those who died while serving our country. Throughout the day, right here on Newsmax TV, we will be checking in on events from all around the world to honor the bravest men and women from generations past and present.
Also, as the Defense Secretary calls on the Iraqi military to step it up, Senator John McCain calls for more aggressive action in the Middle East. We look at new poll numbers. How do Americans really feel about the prospect of more U.S. boots on the ground in the Mideast?
I can understand how they feel, though, because I felt the same way when George Bush was president and Dick Cheney was vice president. It drove me crazy to see them every Memorial Day at the Arlington.
And a discussion about Jane Fonda, who you saw there in the video, causes Larry Elder to blow up. You can see what led to his outburst on Newsmax Prime. That's coming up right here on Newsmax Now. And good afternoon and welcome to the Memorial Day edition of Newsmax Now.
We hope you spend some time today reflecting on the sacrifices made by our servicemen and women. You'll also see the president laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. That coming up in just a moment. But first, we turn to a bomb scare near the U.S. Capitol. That bomb squad detonated a pressure cooker found in a car parked on the National Mall not far from the U.S. Capitol. The vehicle was spotted during the patrol of the area yesterday afternoon. Investigators later said there was nothing hazardous in the car. Pressure cooker bombs, of course, were similar to what was used in the Boston Marathon bombing attack.
Throughout this Memorial Day holiday, we're thanking the men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice while serving our country.
There's nothing more profoundly American than Memorial Day. Throughout our history, American sons and daughters have willingly laid down their lives to strengthen our nation and preserve its freedoms. Indeed, the greatest of this republic is founded in their selfless service.
And last night, thousands attended a concert on the lawn of the U.S. Capitol. In the last hour, President Obama laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier.
When it comes to fighting ISIS, Senator John McCain doesn't think much of the current White House strategy.
There is no strategy. And anybody that says that there is, I'd like to hear what it is, because it certainly isn't apparent.
Also chided the president for saying that the biggest enemy we have is climate change. Meanwhile, Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter is taking the Iraqis to task for the fall of Ramadi. Speaking to CNN, Carter said the Iraqi forces showed no will to fight, and he says they vastly outnumbered the ISIS forces and still retreated.
Cleveland is relatively calm after a weekend of protest. People took to the streets after a white police officer was found not guilty in the shooting death of two unarmed black men. Police say in all, 71 people were arrested during this protest. The charges range from aggravated rioting to obstruction of justice. The protest began Saturday after Officer Michael Brillo was found not guilty. He was one of several officers who fired at a car following a chase back in 2012. Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams were both killed.
Protesters have hit the beach in Santa Barbara, California, rallying after a nearby oil pipeline broke and spilled nearly 105,000 gallons of crude oil onto the local beach and out into the Pacific Ocean. That spill left a slick on the water about 9 miles long.
Former President George W. Bush did not lie about weapons of mass destruction to justify the war in Iraq. That's what journalist Bob Woodward is now saying. Speaking to Fox News, he says his own year-and-a-half investigation shows that Bush was actually skeptical about claims that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Instead, he says the reason the U.S. entered the war was a belief at the time that it would be over in a week or two.
Well, this Memorial Day is going to mean a lot of cleanup across large parts of Texas and Oklahoma. Tornadoes slammed into an apartment complex near Houston, destroying hundreds of homes. Flooding has been set off by torrential rains in North Texas and most of Oklahoma. Some spots in Texas saw 10 inches of rain in just 24 hours. The storms are blamed for 3 deaths so far, and more rain is predicted in that area. Also more storms near the Texas-Mexico border today as well.
Wow, they need a break. One thing we can guarantee about the controversy over the NSA's bulk collection of phone data, nothing will be done about it this week. The Senate failed to act Saturday to extend the bulk collection of phone data under the Patriot Act. It also failed to pass a bill that would replace the bulk collections with a more targeted program that would stop the government from holding all that data.
The Freedom Act is the only way to do it. The House has passed it. The president wants it. All of the intelligence personnel have agreed to it.
But the Senate's now gone home without passing anything. An authorization for several of the intelligence gathering programs under the Patriot Act, well, it runs out on Sunday.
Dr. Ben Carson is going into this Memorial Day with a win over the rest of the GOP presidential field. Over the weekend, Dr. Carson won a straw poll at the Southern Republican Leadership Conference. He beat out Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker by 5 points and Senator Ted Cruz by nearly 10 points. 4 years ago, eventual presidential nominee, GOP nominee, Mitt Romney won this same straw poll.
Jane Fonda in the cover of a fashion magazine.
Yeah, lightning rod. The pairing sparked a fiery debate here on Newsmax TV when conservative columnist Larry Elder and left-leaning Brad Bannon fought over whether Hanoi Jane should have been featured on the cover of W magazine. Take a listen.
I can understand how they feel, though, because I felt the same way when George Bush was president and Dick Cheney was vice president. It drove me crazy to see them every Memorial Day at the Arlington National Monument. And here are two guys who did everything they could to avoid going to Vietnam and were successful in not going to Vietnam. But yet they had, they every year honored our.
Now wait a minute, Brad. Soldiers. You're talking about people with constitutional duties. You may disagree with them politically, but to switch the focus off Jane Fonda, the bottom line is, after the diatribe about President Bush and Vice President Cheney, you understand the distress that some veterans have about Jane Fonda.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do, and I have the same stress about George W. Bush and
All
Dick
right,
Cheney.
fine. That's duly noted. Larry Elder, your turn.
That's incredibly unfair. Incredibly unfair. George W. Bush did serve. Dick Cheney took deferments. They were legal deferments. Jane Fonda went over, consorted with the enemy at the height of the war. I have two brothers, my older brother and younger brother, who were Vietnam-era vets. It pissed them off. It pissed me off.
Well, I would argue at least Jane Fonda admitted she made a mistake. George W. Bush and Dick Cheney never admit they made a mistake.
You know, Brad, any mistake. George W. Bush served. Dick Cheney had deferments. They were lawful. What do you mean mistake? And I agree with you. I think the vets ought to forgive Jane Fonda. She's apologized not just once, but repeatedly. But don't tell me it wasn't a mistake, and don't tell me it wasn't a grave error that she ought to be responsible for the rest of her life.
Well, I disagree with you on that, Larry.
Well, disagreement duly noted.
Bringing up Dick Cheney, so incredibly unfair. Why is Dick Cheney such a hateful person to you? Please tell me that. Tell me that.
Because he sent 4,500 brave young Americans to their deaths by lying about the presence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Wow. A lie that he lied about WMD. A, B, he was vice president. The commander-in-chief named George W. Bush is the one who made the decision, my friend.
Here's a clear distinction, Brad. There's a difference between misinterpreting intelligence and, quote, lying. Now, people can have policy disagreements.
Dick Cheney didn't misinterpret intelligence. He made it up. There was no evidence at all there were weapons.
Can you give me one specific example where Dick Cheney, quote, made it up? One example, please.
Oh, he made up the whole thing about WMDs. There weren't any.
That was quite a heated exchange, to say the least.
I think it encapsulates.
But I can understand why both sides are very passionate about.
Of course, I think it encapsulates the debate we're still having now. You still look back at Jane Fonda. You look at the arguments we're having currently over the situation in Iraq, relitigating the Iraqi war with presidential candidates talking about it. But yet, on this day, we show that, and then we pause for a moment to remember and try to strip away the politics, the controversy, and just focus on the men and women who gave their lives in service to our country.
Right. And that's what we're going to do today, all day, right here on Newsmax Now. It's not going to be a controversial day. We're going to be focusing on this task at hand.
Because we show that because it shows you how important this debate continues to be in this country, we continue to have. But we wanted to show that separately and move on as we continue to celebrate and honor those who served our country. We got much more coming up here on this Memorial Day edition of Newsmax Now. We hope you are watching at home. We also hope you are reflecting about the men and women who served our country. More coming up after this break.